Avery Collins used to believe that love was something steady, like the hum of the refrigerator at night or the familiar creak of the third stair in their townhouse. It wasn't loud or dazzling, but it was dependable. For 8 years, her marriage to Nathaniel Brooks had followed that rhythm. Nathaniel was the kind of man who ironed his shirts on Sunday evenings and set two alarms every weekday morning. He built spreadsheets for everything: monthly budgets, vacation plans, even a projected 5-year savings chart pinned neatly to the corkboard in his home office. Avery once found comfort in his precision. It felt safe, but safety, she had begun to realize, was not the same as being seen. Their house in Maplewood looked picture perfect from the outside: white siding, trimmed hedges, warm porch lights that turn on automatically at dusk. Inside, it felt quieter than it used to. Conversations had become logistical exchanges. Did you call the insurance company? What time is your meeting? Don't forget, we're having dinner with my parents on Saturday. They spoke like business partners managing a small firm rather than two people who had once stayed up all night talking about dreams. Avery worked as a marketing consultant for a boutique fitness brand. Her job demanded creativity, adaptability, and long hours. Nathaniel worked in corporate finance, where predictability was rewarded. At first, their differences balanced each other. Lately, they felt like opposing languages neither wanted to translate anymore. The shift hadn't happened overnight. It arrived gradually: missed date nights, tired sighs, Nathaniel scrolling through his phone while Avery spoke about her day. When she tried to explain that she felt lonely, he would frown, confused. "You're not alone," he'd say. "I'm right here." But being physically present wasn't the same as being emotionally available. Everything changed the evening she attended a networking event downtown. She hadn't wanted to go. Nathaniel had declined, claiming he had a quarterly report to finish. Avery went alone, wearing a navy dress she hadn't worn in years. That's where she met Rowan Mercer. Rowan wasn't louder than anyone else in the room, but he had a way of focusing completely on whoever he was speaking to. When Avery introduced herself, he held eye contact just long enough to make her feel as though the noise of the event had faded into the background. "Marketing strategist?" he said with a slight grin. "That explains the confidence." She laughed, genuinely, unexpectedly. Rowan ran a creative agency that specialized in rebranding struggling companies. He spoke passionately about reinvention, about helping businesses rediscover their voice. As he talked, Avery felt something awaken inside her, a reminder of the ambitious, fearless woman she used to be. They spoke for nearly 40 minutes before either realized how much time had passed. When she finally checked her phone, there was a single text from Nathaniel: "Don't wait up." The message shouldn't have stung, but it did. Over the next week, Rowan sent a polite follow-up email about collaborating on a small campaign. It was professional, direct, harmless. Avery hesitated before responding, though she couldn't quite explain why. Their first meeting took place at a quiet cafe. It was supposed to last an hour. It lasted 3. Rowan listened differently than Nathaniel ever had. When she mentioned feeling creatively stifled at work, he didn't dismiss it as stress. He asked questions. He challenged her. He made her feel capable, interesting, alive. "You deserve to build something that excites you," he said, leaning back in his chair. "You don't strike me as someone who settles." The word lingered. Settles. That night, Avery studied her reflection in the bathroom mirror longer than usual. She tried to pinpoint when she had started shrinking herself, becoming quieter, easier, less demanding. Nathaniel was already asleep when she slid into bed. His back faced her, as it often did. She considered reaching out, placing a hand on his shoulder, bridging the growing space between them. Instead, she lay still. Over the following weeks, professional meetings became friendly lunches. Friendly lunches became late-night brainstorming sessions. They told themselves it was about work, but Avery noticed the details. The way Rowan remembered how she took her coffee, the way he texted after a presentation to say, "You were brilliant in there." Nathaniel hadn't complimented her in months. One evening, while reviewing campaign drafts in Rowan's office, the power flickered during a summer storm. For a moment, they stood in near darkness, illuminated only by the city lights through the window. "You ever feel like you're living someone else's version of your life?" Rowan asked quietly. The question hit too close to home. Avery swallowed. "Sometimes." He stepped closer, not touching, not crossing any visible line, but close enough that she felt the warmth of him. The air shifted. Something unspoken hung between them. Her phone buzzed. That Nathaniel's name flashed on the screen. She hesitated before answering. "Hey," she said. "You coming home soon?" Nathaniel asked. His tone wasn't accusatory, just routine. "Yeah, wrapping up now." There was a pause. "Okay, drive safe." No curiosity. No follow-up questions. No sense that he missed her. When she ended the call, Rowan had stepped back, giving her space. But the moment remained, fragile and dangerous. Driving home through rain-slick streets, Avery's thoughts tangled together. She hadn't done anything wrong. Not technically, but something inside her had shifted. She realized she was looking forward to seeing Rowan in ways that had nothing to do with work, the AT home. Nathaniel sat at the kitchen table reviewing spreadsheets. He looked up briefly. How was it? Good, she replied. He nodded and returned to his laptop. Avery watched him for a long moment, searching for the man she had fallen in love with. The one who used to dance with her in the living room, who once drove 3 hours just to surprise her on her birthday. She wondered if he was still there, buried beneath routine and responsibility, or if he had simply grown in a direction he hadn't followed. Later that night, unable to sleep, she opened her phone and reread a message from Rowan. You deserve more than ordinary. Her chest tightened, not with certainty, but with possibility. She knew she was standing at the edge of something irreversible. The line between emotional connection and betrayal had begun to blur, and she wasn't sure how much longer she could pretend she didn't see it. As rain tapped softly against the window, Avery made a choice she didn't fully understand yet. She didn't delete Rowan's message. Avery told herself that emotional lines were different from physical ones. As long as nothing happened, she could still claim innocence. That was the quiet justification she carried with her the next time she stepped into Rowan Mercer's office. The campaign they were building together had grown ambitious. What started as a consulting project had evolved into a full brand overhaul, and with it came longer evenings, private strategy sessions, and a rhythm that felt dangerously intimate. Rowan challenged her ideas, sharpened her instincts, and trusted her judgment in ways Nathaniel hadn't in years. You think bigger than you admit, Rowan said one evening, sliding a draft across the desk. You just don't give yourself permission to. Avery felt that familiar spark, validation laced with something warmer. She realized she had started dressing more carefully on the days she knew she'd see him. It wasn't dramatic, just subtle choices. A shade of lipstick she hadn't worn in years. He noticed. You look different lately, Rowan said casually. Different how? She asked, though she already knew. Like you're waking up. The word stayed with her long after she left that AT home. Nathaniel Brooks remained consistent, predictable in the way that once reassured her, but now felt suffocating. He still paid bills early, still organized receipts and labeled folders, still kissed her forehead each night without meeting her eyes. But something else had changed. He had begun watching her more closely. Are you working late again tomorrow? He asked one Sunday morning, his tone neutral. We have a deadline, Avery replied. With Rowan? Nathaniel's voice remained even, but there was a subtle tightening around his mouth. She nodded. He didn't argue. He didn't accuse. That almost made it worse. The truth was, Avery no longer needed excuses to stay late. She wanted to. With Rowan, conversations flowed effortlessly from strategy to philosophy to confessions about fear. He told her about his failed engagement 3 years earlier, how ambition had consumed both of them until nothing personal survived. I don't want something hollow again, he admitted quietly. I want something that feels real. The way he looked at her when he said it erased any ambiguity, Avery's heart pounded, not because she didn't understand the implication, but because she did. The first time their hands touched, it was accidental. Or at least, it could be interpreted that way. They both reached for the same file. Fingers brushed. Neither pulled away immediately. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic, but it was deliberate in its stillness. Avery withdrew first. We should focus, she murmured. Rowan nodded, though his gaze lingered. Driving home that night, guilt crept in heavier than before. Nathaniel was not cruel. He was not neglectful in obvious ways. He simply existed in a different emotional frequency now. Was that enough to justify what she was feeling? When she entered the house, Nathaniel was cooking, an unusual sight. Pasta simmered on the stove. I thought we could eat together, he said without turning around. The gesture caught her off guard. At the tea dinner, he asked about her campaign in more detail than he had before. She answered cautiously, careful not to mention Rowan's personal confessions or the way his voice softened when they were alone. You seem happier, Nathaniel observed. She hesitated. I feel productive. He studied her face as if searching for something unspoken. That night, Nathaniel reached for her in bed. Really reached for her, for the first time in months. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't mechanical. It felt like an attempt. Avery responded, but her mind betrayed her. Images of Rowan's intensity flickered uninvited. The comparison unsettled her. Afterward, Nathaniel rested his forehead against hers. "I miss us," he whispered. The vulnerability in his voice pierced her more sharply than any accusation could have. For a brief moment, she considered ending everything with Rowan, cutting it off before it crossed a line she couldn't uncross. The next afternoon, Rowan invited her to a small celebratory gathering at his agency. The campaign had secured a major client. The team applauded Avery's contribution. Rowan introduced her not as a consultant, but as the visionary behind the rebrand. She felt seen in a way that was intoxicating. Later, after everyone left, the office grew quiet. City lights shimmered through the glass walls. The air between them felt charged with inevitability. "You deserve to be celebrated," Rowan said softly. "I'm married," she replied, though her voice lacked conviction. "I know." He stepped closer, not forceful, not urgent, just certain. "Tell me you don't feel this," he said. Silence stretched. Avery's pulse thundered in her ears. She thought about Nathaniel cooking dinner, about his whispered confession, about the years they had built together. She also thought about the way she felt standing here, alive, chosen, understood. "I feel it," she admitted. The honesty shifted everything. Rowan didn't kiss her immediately. He gave her space to step away. She didn't. When his hand finally rested against her cheek, it felt less like an impulsive act and more like the completion of a sentence they had both been writing for weeks. The kiss was slow, searching, deliberate. It wasn't about urgency. It was about confirmation. Avery knew, even as she leaned into it, that she had crossed the boundary she once promised herself she wouldn't. When she pulled back, breath unsteady, reality rushed in. "This changes things," she said. "It clarifies things," Rowan replied on the drive home. Rain began falling again. Mirroring the night, she first felt the shift. But this time, there was no ambiguity. She had made a choice. Inside the house, the lights were off. Nathaniel had gone to bed. Avery stood in the dark kitchen longer than necessary, staring at the quiet room that had once felt safe. Now it felt fragile. Her phone vibrated at a message from Rowan. No more pretending. She stared at the words, understanding that secrecy would now become part of her routine. Lies would have to be constructed, schedules adjusted, stories aligned. Upstairs, Nathaniel shifted in his sleep as she slipped into bed beside him. He turned instinctively toward her, arm draping across her waist. Avery lay awake, caught between two realities, one built on history, the other on desire. For the first time, she wondered not whether she could manage both, but which one would survive when the truth finally surfaced. Secrecy reshaped Avery Collins faster than love ever had. She became strategic. Calendar blocks were adjusted with surgical precision. Client meetings multiplied conveniently on evenings when Rowan Mercer's text read, "Can I see you?" She learned to silence notifications before walking through the front door of the townhouse she still shared with Nathaniel Brooks. The affair, because she could no longer call it anything softer, settled into a rhythm. Rowan did not treat it like something casual. That was part of the danger. He spoke about the future in careful hypotheticals. "If you were free," he would say, tracing invisible patterns across her palm, "what would you build? Not if we were together." Not explicitly, but the implication hovered. Avery told herself she wasn't planning an exit from her marriage. She was simply experiencing something she had been missing. That distinction mattered to her. Even if it was fragile, like a tea home. Nathaniel grew quieter. He began asking fewer questions, not more. He stopped requesting details about her day. Instead, he observed. Avery noticed the way his eyes lingered when she stepped out of the shower and reached for her phone before a towel. The way he checked the clock when she said she'd be late one evening, as she prepared to leave for what she described as a client dinner. Nathaniel stood in the doorway of their bedroom. "You've changed," he said plainly. The statement held no anger, only exhaustion. "I've grown," Avery replied, adjusting an earring to avoid his gaze. "Without me." The words struck harder than she expected. She paused. For a moment, she considered telling him everything, not out of confession, but out of relief. Living two versions of herself was beginning to fracture her sense of identity. Instead, she reached for her purse. "We'll talk this weekend." They both knew weekends had become placeholders for conversations that never happened. Rowan, meanwhile, was becoming less patient with ambiguity. "I don't want to be the hidden part of your life," he admitted one night as they stood on the balcony of his apartment, city wind tangling Avery's hair. "I care about you. I'm not pretending I don't." His vulnerability felt sincere. That made it heavier. "You knew I was married," Avery said quietly. I knew you were unhappy. The correction unsettled her. Was she unhappy? Or had she simply been restless? The difference mattered. One justified escape. The other demanded responsibility. Their relationship intensified in emotional intimacy rather than spectacle. They spoke about childhood fears, about ambition, about regret. Rowan told her he had started imagining mornings with her. Coffee shared without secrecy, laughter without lowered voices. You deserve to live honestly, he said. Honesty. The word felt ironic. Back at home, Nathaniel made an unexpected request. Take Friday off, he said over breakfast. Let's drive somewhere. Just us. Avery hesitated. Friday was the day she and Rowan had planned to finalize a new proposal and spend the afternoon together. I can't, she replied too quickly. Deadlines. Nathaniel studied her face for a long moment. There's always a deadline. She saw then that he wasn't oblivious. He was grieving. That night, she found him in his office, not working but staring at an old framed photograph from their honeymoon. She hadn't seen him look at it in years. Do you remember this? He asked without turning around. Of course, she said softly. You used to look at me like that. Avery swallowed. People change, or they stop trying. The conversation lingered unfinished, thick with truths neither fully articulated. The following week, everything tilted. Avery left her phone on the kitchen counter while showering. A notification illuminated the screen. Rowan, I miss waking up next to you. Nathaniel saw it. He did not confront her immediately. When she stepped into the kitchen, towel wrapped tightly around her, he was sitting at the table. Her phone lay face up between them. Who is Rowan? He asked. His voice was calm in a way that terrified her. Silence pressed in from every direction. You went through my phone? She deflected instinctively. That's what you're worried about? He replied. The disappointment in his expression cut deeper than anger would have. Avery opened her mouth to construct a partial truth, a blurred explanation about emotional confusion, about feeling disconnected. But the evidence was undeniable. The message wasn't ambiguous. How long? Nathaniel asked. She hesitated. That long, he concluded quietly as he stood up, running a hand through his hair in a gesture she recognized from moments of stress at work. But this wasn't a quarterly report. This was personal devastation. Was I that terrible? He asked. The question fractured her composure. No, she said immediately. You weren't terrible. Then what was I? She struggled to answer honestly without sounding cruel. Distant, she whispered. Predictable. I felt invisible. Nathaniel closed his eyes briefly, absorbing the words. And this man makes you visible? Yes. The honesty felt like both liberation and betrayal. Nathaniel nodded slowly, as if aligning internal calculations. Are you in love with him? The question hung between them like a verdict. Avery thought about Rowan's certainty, his passion, the way he made her feel alive. She thought about Nathaniel's steadiness, his history, the life they had built. I don't know, she admitted. Nathaniel exhaled, a sound heavy with resignation. I can't compete with a fantasy, he said, especially if you're still deciding. He picked up the framed honeymoon photo from the counter and set it gently inside a drawer. I need space, he continued. Not from you, from this. For the first time since the affair began, Avery felt the real cost of her choices. Not in secrecy or guilt, but in the visible erosion of someone who had once loved her without question. That evening, she met Rowan and told him the truth. He knows, she said, but Rowan's reaction was immediate. Good. Then we don't have to hide. His optimism unsettled her. It's not that simple, she replied. It could be, he insisted. If you choose. Choose. The word followed her home like an echo. When she walked back into the townhouse, the air felt altered. Nathaniel's suitcase sat near the staircase, not packed fully, but present enough to signal possibility. She realized then that the fantasy she had been living with Rowan was about to collide with irreversible reality. For the first time, Avery understood that whatever she chose next would define not just her marriage, but the kind of person she would have to become to live with it. The suitcase remained by the staircase all night. Avery Collins didn't sleep. She lay in the dark listening to the quiet movements of Nathaniel Brooks in the guest room down the hall, each sound measured and restrained. The physical distance between them felt symbolic, almost ceremonial, as if their marriage had already begun its slow dismantling that BY morning. The house felt unfamiliar. Nathaniel stood in the kitchen dressed for work, tie knotted with precise efficiency. His composure unsettled her more than rage would have. I'm staying at Daniel's for a few days, he said evenly. I need to think. Avery nodded. Words felt insufficient. He paused before walking past her. You don't get to drift anymore, Avery. Whatever this is, you decide. The door closed behind him with controlled finality. For the first time since the affair began, silence did not feel like safety. It felt like consequence. She texted Rowan Mercer. He's leaving for a few days. That Rowan's reply came quickly. Then come over. We can finally talk without fear. The word finally unsettled her. For Rowan, exposure meant freedom. For Avery, it meant collapse. Still, she went. Rowan greeted her with certainty, not hesitation. He didn't ask whether she was okay. He assumed she had already crossed the internal threshold. This is what we knew would happen, he said, guiding her inside. You can't live divided forever. Avery sat on the edge of his couch, absorbing the weight of that truth. Nathaniel asked if I'm in love with you, she said quietly. Rowan held her gaze. Are you? She had rehearsed this answer in her mind, but speaking it felt irreversible. I care about you, she began carefully. You make me feel alive. You make me feel seen. That's not what I asked. The distinction sharp in the air. Avery inhaled slowly. I don't know if what I feel is love, or if it's escape. Rowan's expression shifted, subtle but unmistakable. I'm not an escape, he said, I know. But did she? She realized that much of her connection to Rowan had grown in contrast to Nathaniel. Rowan was intense where Nathaniel was steady. Spontaneous where Nathaniel was structured. Vocal where Nathaniel had grown quiet. Had she fallen in love with Rowan, or with the version of herself she became around him? You told me I deserve more than ordinary, she said. But what if ordinary was something I stopped nurturing? Rowan didn't respond immediately. Are you saying you want to fix your marriage? He asked. I'm saying I don't know if I tried hard enough before stepping outside it. The admission hung heavy between them. For the first time, Rowan looked uncertain. I don't want to be someone you choose out of confusion, he said. I want to be chosen because I'm right for you. And if I can't promise that yet, he exhaled slowly. Then you figure it out. There was no anger in his voice, just boundary. Avery left his apartment with less clarity than she'd hoped for. Back at the townhouse, the emptiness felt louder. She wandered through rooms filled with shared history. The dining table where Nathaniel had proposed during a quiet dinner at home. The couch where they once planned vacations they never took. She opened the drawer where he had placed their honeymoon photo. The image showed two younger versions of themselves laughing under sunlight, unaware of future fractures. Her phone vibrated. Nathaniel. She hesitated before answering. I'm not calling to argue, he said immediately. I just need to know something. She braced herself. Are you willing to try? Not because you're afraid of being alone. Not because it's convenient. But because you still believe in us. The question stripped everything down to its core. Did she believe in them? Avery closed her eyes, forcing herself past guilt, past excitement, past ego. I don't want to throw away 8 years without fighting for them, she said finally. Nathaniel was quiet for several seconds. That's not the same as loving me, he replied. I do love you, she insisted, surprising herself with how true it felt. But I lost myself somewhere along the way. And instead of fixing that, I looked for someone else to hand it back to me. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from clarity. I need to understand who I am without hiding, she continued. Whether that's with you or not. Nathaniel's tone softened slightly. I can't promise forgiveness overnight. I'm not asking for it. I won't share you, he added firmly. The boundary was unmistakable. After the call ended, Avery sat alone in the quiet house and understood something she had avoided confronting. This was no longer about choosing between two men. It was about choosing integrity over impulse. She texted Rowan one final message that I can't see you while I figure this out. It wouldn't be fair to you or to me. The response came minutes later, I won't wait forever. She didn't expect him to. That evening, Nathaniel returned. Not with reconciliation, but with conversation. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table like strangers negotiating terms. I was complacent, he admitted. I thought stability was enough. I should have told you I was drowning before I reached for someone else, Avery replied. The honesty was painful but grounding. They agreed on one thing. Clarity required time, and time required separation from outside interference. Counseling was mentioned, not as a guarantee, but as effort. For the first time since the affair began, Avery felt something steadier than desire. Responsibility. Later, alone in the bedroom, she deleted Rowan's message thread, not out of denial, but closure. The action didn't erase what had happened, but signaled intention. She stood at the window, watching the streetlights flicker on as evening settled. She had stepped outside her marriage, searching for intensity, and found consequence. She had mistaken validation for certainty. She had confused being seen with being saved. Now she faced a quieter, more difficult task, rebuilding trust, or walking away honestly if rebuilding proved impossible. Downstairs, Nathaniel moved through the house, not as an enemy, but as a man wounded yet still present. Avery understood that whichever path she chose next would not offer fantasy. It would require patience, accountability, and uncomfortable truth. For the first time, she wasn't driven by secrecy or longing. She was driven by decision. And this time, she intended to make it with her eyes open.